Welcome to On the Edge with April Mahoney Brains. You're at the spot, the place, where the conversation is pointed, the guests are sharp, and the responses are never dull. Did you bring your thinking caps? It's time to put them on, because the conversation starts now. Welcome to On the Edge with April Mahoney Brains. How are you? I hope you are living your highest and greatest good. Today we are going to be visiting with Robin Johnson. Robin is super smart. She's got an MBA and an MAPP. In what, you might ask? In business organization. Organizational behaviors. What are the behaviors in the workplace now? They're so convoluted. You've got managers that are managing people that are in-house, the brick and mortar, but also hybrid. You've got individuals that are annoyed and quietly quitting. You've got workplace disgruntledness between employees, building processes, improvement. How do we communicate? How do we evaluate? What's important? What is the bottom line? And that's what companies are looking for, revenue and bottom line. But how do they incorporate these two philosophies to make a cohesive workplace here in the 21st century, 2025? So we're going to talk to Robin about that and a whole lot more. Let's welcome her to the show. How are you, Robin Johnson?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate being on here. You have such a vibrant spirit and always a positive message to bring to your audience. And I really consider it a privilege to be here. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Brain, she gave me my flowers and I'm not even dead. Tell my brains a little bit about you, Robin, and how you show up in the world, please.
Okay, it is 1982, and I am in the MBA program at Brigham Young University, and I am choosing to emphasize organizational behavior. Well, we also have a bunch of guys in finance and accounting and stats and all of that. And they are complaining because everybody is required during the first year to take at least one class in organizational behavior. They're complaining and saying this is a waste of time and we could be taking another class in stats or in accounting or in finance. And we have to waste our time in this OB class. Well, the summer of 1983, in between our first and second years, everyone goes and we get it taken in, do an internship. Come back in the fall, and everyone reports on their internship. Every single one of those guys, I call them finance jocks, every single one of them said the most important things that they learned was in organizational behavior, how to get along in these organizations for a summer. And so all of us in the OB department felt totally vindicated. Well, then flash forward many, many years, about 40 years. And 5 years ago, I went back to the University of Pennsylvania and got my master's in applied positive psychology
Oh,
and studied directly with Martin Seligman, Karen Rivich, Angela Duckworth, and some of the other giants in positive psychology. And some of the classes dealt with positive organizations. We call it positive organizational scholarship. That totally aligned with what I had learned 40 years earlier in my BYU MBA program when it was then a pretty new field. And I've also always felt really passionate about human beings in organizations.
again, I'm going to be the devil's advocate a little bit because I want you to not just convince me, excuse me, but educate people that are in the workplace. Again, as I explained in the introduction, it has changed so much. And a lot of companies are looking for the bottom line. They are not worrying about this gentler, kinder, excuse me. It's about efficiency. It's about getting it done by any means necessary. So tell us and define for us what is organizational behavior. Maybe I got it wrong.
Well, it's a study of how people operate within organizations and how people affect the bottom line. And some of you might be old enough to remember this book, In Search of Excellence, which came out in the 80s. And I was actually on a Zoom call with Tom Peters where he was talking. He's still alive. He's still alive, by the way. At least he was a year or two ago during this Zoom webinar. And he said, if I were to start all over again, I would not take my work to the human resources department. I would take it to the finance department because they're the ones who need it. And I'd take it to the accounting department. They're the ones who need it. And my feeling is that we adults spend most of our lives at work.
Yes.
Is it too much to have workplaces that are humane, ethical, and resilient? I don't think so.
I don't think so either, but the temperament and the client, uh, the client's expectations and the bottom line revenue is putting pressure. Artificial intelligence, people are always worried about outsourcing. So there's always this underlined elephant in the room that people don't want to talk about. And so, how do we create a corporate culture that is open to this kind of dialogue?
Well, there's a very famous line attributed to Peter Drucker who said, Culture will eat strategy for breakfast."
Mm,
And so, what that means is that you can have all the strategies in the world, but ultimately, it's human beings who are implementing those strategies. And if the human beings aren't functioning well, if the human beings aren't getting along well, if the underlings feel like they're just a cog in the wheel and they don't really matter to the organization, then they're not going to be functioning to their capacity. And that will have a definite impact on the bottom line. And so I think that along with this growth uh, in the bottom line, there is now a growing awareness of this human side of business.
absolutely. And you know what? That toxicity is contagious. It flows from one person to another person, be it uh, not completing tasks, the workplace gossip, the backbiting, or the person that is envious of the other person, not getting the raises, the pressure from the top down. Two things. I remember when I worked at the utility company, the pyramid was not like this. Our pyramid was inverted. It was like this. And so what they did is they really, really took interest in us from the bottom to the top and spread that. And I thought that was fascinating. But along the same lines, we were sent to a seminar where the main person, the facilitator, talked about the sense of entitlement and that there is no more um, guaranteed retirement or pensions. Or so, what is the buy-in for this corporate culture change?
Well, one of the things that really struck me it was 2019, and I was just starting my master's program, is October 2019. I was in Philadelphia. From there, I flew to an annual conference that I attend every year. It's called the Association for Financial Professionals. It's
Mm,
the national conference, thousands of people attend. And I noticed for the first time on the schedule, they had classes that dealt with positive organizations and the corporate culture. Well, amazingly enough, during the final keynote, the president of AFP is on the stage, and behind him, in letters like 6 feet tall, it says soft skills.
wow.
And he is intoning about, hey, we're starting to realize that the people in the organization really have an impact on the bottom line. And we're starting to realize that, yeah, these soft skills really do matter. Well, 5 months later, COVID hit. And the world soon realized that those weren't soft skills, they were power skills.
Mm,
And
mm,
the degree to which organizations used those soft skills, now turned power skills, impacted did they get knocked down or not? Well, everybody got knocked down, but did they get back up? And how did they get back? And how long did it take them to get back up? So here you have soft skills. 5 months later, COVID hits, and no, these are power skills, and they impact the bottom line. How do you make it through?
okay. For people that are not aware, what are some soft skills?
The one of the top things I would say is creating a sense of belonging in an organization? Do
Absolutely.
you feel like you matter to the organization? Do you feel like you contribute? The other thing is really important is there a sense of meaning in the organization? You know, I keep right here my little bottle of WD-40, which everybody uses. And during another webinar I was listening to during COVID, the president of WD-40, yeah, the company is called WD-40.
Oh,
The
wow.
president of WD-40 was going on and on and on about the meaning in his company. He said, you know, we're just not, this isn't just oil in a can. We're helping companies solve problems. We're helping families fix things so they can get on their vacation. We're helping travelers not have squeaky doors in their hotel room. He went on and on about the meaning of their company. They were started in 1958,
Wow.
and I was blown away. And so it's like if WD-40 can have meaning in their organization, then anybody can.
And it's about the buy-in. And we're
Yes,
talking about
absolutely.
more than, it used to be a time where people had great pride in the company that they worked for. They were ride or die. You look at the auto industry, you look at manufacturing and steel and, even cosmetic companies. They really, really ingrained in you how important you were as an individual contributor to an organization. And brains, that's what you want to consider when you go for an interview. Don't try to go in as the supervisor or the boss because that's who you're interviewing with. You bring to them what you bring to the table. What is your individual contribution? What is your skill set? What is your thoughts? How are you going to be able to blend your flexibilities? And sometimes you have to be vulnerable and expose your flaws.
Absolutely.
But
One of
it,
the real Yeah, one of the really powerful things is for management to look at the people in their organization as their most valuable asset. I call it mining for gold. There is gold hiding in the people that work for you. And there are ways of being able to, the way you phrase your questions, the way you do, it's called a process called appreciative inquiry, which I've been trained in. How do you go about discovering the strengths and the assets and the positive contributions that already exist in your organization? And then how can you decide, well, where do we want to be? How do we then take those strengths and those assets and create new pathways, new protocols, new products to get where we want to be? And so it's a really very exciting process that I'm really excited about is how are we able to mine for gold within our organization?
well, you do that with the power of the question.
Mm, yes, absolutely. The
Power,
very first question starts the change.
it does. And be a good listener, brains, be it on the employee side or the management side, because there's key information if you overtalk that you may miss. In an interview, that's an exchange of information. You want to have great questions that you ask the company. So, what do you find fascinating? How long have you been here? What are your goals and aspirations? Where do you see the company in 5 years? You got to flip the script because this is somewhere that you are going to plant your feet at least for 5 years. I was reading in the Wall Street Journal because that's about it now, about 5 years with a company, and everything is changing. Again, how do you engage with your employees and they're not there front and center? They're working remotely. That's a challenge too.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting you bring up listening because in your book here, as you'll see right over there, Ennobling Business for Success. I was one of the co-authors for this book, and we were very proud that it reached international bestseller status in 13 countries, and it hit the number one spot in 29 different categories. And the chapter that I wrote, one piece of that was to listen diversely. And it's how many voices are you listening to? For example, if you're going to be doing a remodel on your building, do you invite the janitor to come to those planning meetings? Do you invite the head of the landscaping crew? to come in? How about the secretary? And so we have all these different levels that we don't realize how our decisions are going to be impacting multiple levels, who has to execute those decisions. And unless we bring them into the decision making and the creation making process, we're missing out on a lot of voices.
Exactly. And ideas, stimulating ideas. There's growth there. I mean, you look at some people that have been in organizations and someone come up with a bright idea and it's taken that company to the moon.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
You
being an
know,
active, engaged listener is very important.
yeah. A couple of stories that were really exciting to me is an organization, they had in their middle management, they had 50% turnover
Woo!
every year. I mean, that's horrific. It's really horrific. It's expensive, it's demoralizing, destabilizing. And so they were looking at, okay, how can we stop this 50%, turnover every year? Well, instead, they did this process of appreciative inquiry, mining for gold, as I call it. And instead, they began asking, how can we create a magnetic work environment?
Mm,
And over the next year or two, turnover dropped by 50%. Another really great story, and this will resonate with many people because it was an international company. And so they dealt with multiple time zones, multiple countries with their different rules and regulations. And this was the customer service department. Well,
mm,
how do you run a customer service department? There's a lot of, kind of animosity between these different cultures of countries, time zones, etc. And so they flipped the question and they said, how can we provide service without borders? And they came up with, so they said, what are some ideas? And they began with this positive question, how can we provide service without borders? In the first year, they came up with 300
mm.
ideas
Wow.
on how they could improve their organization. Now, I would have thought 50 ideas was a lot, but when I read 300, and it just totally opens up. It totally opens up the power of asking questions and the power of mining for gold. It can absolutely, and there you see, it has an impact on the bottom line. Both of those it had an impact on the bottom line.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a pleasant place to be. Who wants to
Yes.
be somewhere that's toxic? When you wake up in the morning, oh God, you're drudging going in. You got to deal with getting the kids to school, the traffic. You get there and you got to settle in with some people that are not nice. Let's talk about conflict resolution. Give us some suggestions, and where do you see that companies can mitigate? Because you know what, it's not going to be perfect, but it's about the conversation. I'll tell you one thing with me. I had a boss. Ooh, wait. She was something else. And you know what? I said, I'm going to quit, but I love the job. And I said, no, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to come up with a teachable moment. So what did I do? I asked her, could we have a meeting? She says, right. She wants to march right to her cubicle. Oh, no, 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 no. Let's go outside. Let's go to the coffee cart, change the environment. Now she was not in her power play mode. We were on equal setting. And I was just, what is it? I took ownership for me first. What is it that you're feeling that I'm exuding that is not productive? I didn't want to say, you don't like me and all. That's kind of juvenile. But what are you seeing, or how can I grow? How can I get better? I started with me. And it set her off her game because she thought I was going to come and straight attack her. No, I didn't. And then with the environment change, with a nice little latte out there, we had a beautiful courtyard, very relaxed. That 20 minutes that I asked for turned into an hour. Give us some suggestions on conflict resolution.
Yeah. That's a beautiful story, by the way. Good for you. You manifested many of the ideas that obviously work because it improved your situation. And one of the things I would say is to begin with uh, positive intent or positive, assuming the assuming that the person you're talking with is coming from a good intention. So assume positive intent. Don't just assume that people, wake up in the morning and they say, how can I make life really miserable in the company I work for? No, everybody is going to work trying to, put food on the table, trying to do a good job, trying to interact. And so instead of just assuming that someone is out to get you, someone is purposely doing a bad job, assume maybe they need some additional training. Maybe there's something going on, at home that's impacting them. So I would say to listen with a more of an open mind and come with positive intent to begin with.
Right. And it's the same thing like when you go to ask for a raise. When you go to negotiate salary, don't automatically assume that you're entitled. You've got to come with receipts. What have you done? What have you contributed? What have you offset? How have you saved the company money? What are the comments that you're getting from coworkers and clients? All of these things hold weight. And then you can go in and say, okay, this is how I have contributed. This is what I feel would be fair and equitable. And then you get that and do that at the performance review time. It's hard for, I would think, a manager to assess and evaluate when a person is off site. I mean, you can walk past their desk and see what they're doing, engage with them, kind of peek over their shoulder, interact with them. But when they're off site, this has changed the dynamic of the workplace considerably. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Remote work is one of the, huge changes, obviously because of COVID. And I would say one of the biggest things is how do you create a sense of belonging in an organization? Because then they will be more engaged. And in fact, Qualtrics, they do tons of surveys, and every year they do a survey detecting employee to assess employee engagement. Well, in 2021, their survey, something had never happened before. A sense of belonging shot to the top. It had never been that way before. Before it had been like pay, work schedule flexibility, etc. This time it was belonging, and it stayed there for 2 years. Now, what we believe is that's because of COVID. People wanted to have a sense of belonging because now everyone, or many people are working remotely. And they did this survey over 17 different, I think it was like 20,000 people, 17 different industries, and 17 different regions around the world. So it was a very broad survey. And one of the people that I was doing a presentation with, she had always worked remotely because she managed five people in 5 different states.
Oh,
And
wow.
so she would do things like, hey, take a picture and post it, through the chat, where are you today? Hey, I'm here, I'm here. How about she sent everybody a mug a coffee mug with the company logo on it, and they'd get onto Zoom, once a week, everyone with their coffee mug for 15 minutes. We're not going to talk about work. We're just say, how are you doing? What are you being up to? How are your kids, etc. And then she would arrange when it was somebody's birthday. They have, there's companies that will deliver birthday cakes, in various cities. And so she would have a birthday cake delivered to their home, and then people sing happy birthday. So not every company can afford to do that because when you've got thousands of workers, might be a little much. But those little things that we can do. And what's interesting is that what your company does is less important than who you are and how you do it. My sister and her husband own a small company in Wyoming. They make beef jerky. That is a Wyoming gourmet beef, and they make beef jerky and beef sticks and things like that. And they hired a woman who had been kind of down on her luck, but they hired her. And after about 4 months, she said to my sister, as she was leaving for work that day, she said, I just want you to know that I consider it a privilege to work here. And they're making beef jerky.
Right.
Another story is it's the over Timberlake, the Timberlake products where they make outdoor clothing and boots and gloves and shoes. And many years ago, they began sourcing the cotton that they used in their clothing. They began sourcing it through locations that didn't use pesticides, that would use organic ways of managing the bugs in their cotton.
Hmm.
And the president said, and the president, this was years before this being environmentally friendly became the thing. It was years before that. And it was very expensive for them to begin sourcing their cotton. And he said is what we do is make boots and gloves and clothing, but that is not who we are.
Hmm.
Nobody cares about those workers who are picking the cotton and are they being exposed to carcinogenics.
Oh,
But we care. And even though our clients might not know that we are sourcing our cotton fairly and sustainably and taking into account the health of those workers in those third world countries, but that is who we are.
right.
And I think that is really important. It's not just what you do. You can be making beef jerky and you can create an environment where people say, the way I phrase it is creating workplaces where people want to stay
Right.
instead of wanting to leave.
Right. Right. Absolutely. I totally get that. I totally get that. Well, you do some great things. Tell us a little bit about what you do on stage when you're speaking to these organizations.
Well, I basically try to share this same message, and I sometimes will use little clips from movies. One of my very favorite scenes, and at the very beginning of this interview, I kind of reference what I say here, but in It's a Wonderful Life, and Jimmy Stewart, George Bailey, is confronting Mr. Potter, where they're trying to decide are we going to keep the company going or not. And he says, this rabble you're talking about, well, they do most of the working and paying and living and dying in this community. Well, is it too much to have them work and pay and live and die in a couple of decent rooms and a bath?
Hmm.
And that's how I bring it to and using this as an analogy, we adults spend most of our lives at work. And is it too much to have workplaces that are humane, ethical, and resilient? And what I love to do is instead of just being a talking head, I love to work with organizations in a process called appreciative inquiry. It's what I call mining for gold, where it's a specific process where we go in. It can be for a few hours or it can be for a couple of days, and we discover what are our strengths, and then dream where do we want to be, and then design these prototypes and these pathways and these products to get us where we want to be, and then have a I'm forgetting what that last D is, but we have a mechanism, what I call it a return and report mechanism, where you come back and you say, okay, we had all these ideas. Are they actually being implemented? And what more do we need to do to actually implement them? It's an entire process, and you can do it on a tiny slice of an issue in your company for a few hours, or take a bigger issue and take a day or a couple of days to do it. And I love to go into organizations and do that. So if you're watching this show, please contact me. And if you reference Hello Brains, then I'll give you a discount on the workshop that we do for you.
This is so important because you want to be happy when you go to work. Or if you're not happy, be content. It's going to spill over in every aspect of your life, your physical, your emotional, your finances, your relationship. It turns from dis-ease to disease, your mental health. You hear horrific stories of people going into the workplace because they've been bullied or they didn't get the raise or their boss said this or boss said that. Have a heightened sensibility. when you come into the office, how much does it take to look at the person that's in the cubicle next to you and say, hey, good morning? They don't have to be your best friend or have a good evening. No, without that, because again, as my mother would say, if they talked about Jesus, they're going to talk about you. But give them something good to talk about. I have worked in places where I didn't want to go home sometime because we would have a great time. We'd have the potluck, or we just have conversations, or this is the perfect example. I know my mother was in the hospital, and it was during COVID. And you couldn't really go into the room with the person, you had to wait. They let me go in with her. And the nurses treated each other like gold. Hey, I know you're tired. Let me check on that patient for you. Let me be sure to call and get this room clean. Can I get you some coffee? Do you need me to follow up on this report? What did the doctor say? This, that. The way that they treated one another, Robin, made me just so comfortable that I knew that if they treated one another like that, that they were going to give my mother also pristine care. Because it wasn't just one person tending to her, it was everybody on that shift. And so I say that to ask us to go back to the days of civility, go back to the days of kindness. You don't have to be overboard. You don't have to kiss rump. But you do have to, but you do have to be nice, and you do have to be civil, respectful, and appreciate other people's input. You're not always the sharpest knife in the drawer. There are other people there that have great ideas, but they're playing small. They've been suppressed. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They deserve that. They're taking up space in your environment, be it upper management, be it the CEO, be it the janitor. Wherever I worked in an organization, you best believe I knew everything. I might have needed to get some paper towels. I knew the janitor. I might have had a problem with my pay. I knew the payroll clerk. I might have wanted to schmooze and get into a special meeting. I knew the CEO. Get to know who these people are, whether they are virtual or they're right there. It's real tough now because there's a new sheriff in town, and with that, people are moving away from DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay, I get that. Everybody should be on equal footing, but bring something to the table. Don't just give me something because I'm a color or I'm a sex or I'm a gender. No, base it upon what I bring to the table, how I can elevate an organization. But along those same lines, give me a seat at the table so that I can tell you what I bring to the table. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's
Yeah,
ask you,
absolutely.
let's ask you some fun questions. Robin, if this was not your zone of genius, what else would you do?
Well, I wear multiple hats. I am also a fraud prevention specialist.
Oh,
I also work in a company that specializes in check fraud prevention. It's called Safe Checks. It's actually my brother's company. I've worked there for maybe 25 years. And we work very closely with Frank Abagnale of Catch Me If You Can. And I'm the primary editor of the Abagnale Fraud Bulletin. It's now we're just are working on volume 18. It's now up to 34 pages. I do research on many different kinds of fraud, and then put that research on how to prevent it in the bulletin.
tap
And
into that just for a minute. Tap into
yeah.
that just for a minute. Tell us about, because identity fraud, check fraud, people are putting their name on your property deed, superseding the will and trust. What are two or three just things that we should kind of be on top of or think about or try to, because it's hard to protect yourself in the cyber world.
Yeah. Well, the one of the biggest ways they commit fraud is through what they call BEC scams, business email compromise, or VEC, vendor email compromise. And you'll get an email saying, "Oh, can you open up this document?" Well, you weren't expecting it. It's coming from someone maybe you don't know, or maybe it looks like it's coming from someone you do know, but you're not really expecting it. And just avoid clicking on any links that you're not expecting. Don't open up any attachments you're not expecting. Here's the other thing. This is extremely important. If you get a notice from one of your vendors that they're saying, "Oh, we've changed our bank," or "We've changed our mailing address where you should mail your check to pay us," you need to independently verify that. And that means you don't look at the phone number on the email that you got or on even on the letter that you got. You go into your records and you find a phone number that you have already called, and you call them, and you then you verify it. And here's what's interesting. This really interesting fraud thing just happened where someone called in and they said, "Oh, we want to change the our banking address, and Mary is going to email you." Well, then Mary emailed the person, but it was the phony email. So because this person, they said, "Well, I was talking to them on the phone and then they sent an email." I thought it was a real person. I thought I didn't need to then hang up, verify, and then call him back and do it. And they didn't follow protocol, which is independently
Right.
verify. And one of the things that's really along those lines, with our checks, they're called safe checks. We have never had a check replicated and used in a check fraud scam ever. And we've been in business, next year will be 30 years. The
Are,
reason why,
are people
the
still accepting checks?
Oh, yes. Yeah. In personal checks, the usage has gone way down. And for businesses, it was going way down. But this last year, in the survey done by AFP, their Payments Fraud and Control Survey, I was shocked to see that 91% of their respondents said they had started using checks again. And a lot of it is because there have been so much fraud. There's always fraud. It'll get really high over here in the credit card fraud and wire fraud and all that. So now let's go use checks. And there'll be fraud here.
Right.
But one of the reasons why we haven't is with every brand new order, we call the bank and we verify that the name, the account number, and the shipping address are all legitimate and on file with the bank. And if we ever get a change of shipping address request, we will independently go in and verify, is that new address truly connected to that company? And the other thing that we do is we never sell any checks that are 100% blank. Because of technology, the software, companies can just take a blank piece of paper and they can produce a check, everything that needs to go on a check. They used to have to be pre-printed. Now they don't have to be. They can print it themselves. So what we do from the very beginning, we never sell anything that's 100% blank. That's how the criminals get their checks. Thank you very much. On every check, every order, there is something to identify it to a company. Maybe it's a logo real tiny in the corner. Maybe it's their website printed on the edge. Maybe it's an acronym or their slogan, printed in the corner. But we do something to identify it to that company.
Wow.
So that's one thing. And the other thing I do is I'm also a Suzuki violin teacher, and I'm the co-director of the Suzuki Music Program of Los Angeles. So I go from preventing fraud to teaching Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
And putting all of that beauty together to make one harmonious workplace. And
Yes, absolutely.
children, calmness, respect, patience, tolerance. If we instill that in them at an early age, it can't do anything but blossom until we get older. I'm going to ask you a
Beautiful.
couple other quick questions because these are my favorite questions of the interview, and I can't get away with that. If you were an appliance in the kitchen, Robin, what appliance would you be?
I would be a little spinner that you can put into your drink,
Ooh,
like you have milk and you put some protein powder in it. I would be a little spinner that would spin around and get everything done
you know
because it's
what?
very,
I'm
very
glad you said
efficient.
that because I'm putting some collagen now in my tea. I forgot
Yes.
I do have one of those little spinners.
Well, you know what? I got my little spinner because my daughter gave it to me. I have no idea where she got it, but I'm sure if you look online, you'll be able to find
I
a
love it.
little tiny spinner. It looks like a little tiny whisk, and then it
Exactly.
sits
Now,
down
why
inside.
would you be that?
Why would I be that?
Yeah.
Uh, because to me, it's very helpful. It gets the job done more easily. It gets the job done better. And I just, I like to be proactive. I like to be productive. I like to be helpful, and like to get things done. And so I think that's why I would choose that, because it definitely helps me. I use it every day. It helps me get my powder spun around.
I think too, because you're kind of nice and petite. You can there and get it done. It's not overthinking it. You don't have to be this big, massive blender. You don't have to be this big frothing machine. You can just go in nice and easy, whip it up, and get it done. Well, you've done
Yeah.
a great job. Tell my brains how to get in contact with you and how to purchase a copy of the book.
The book can be, you can find the book. Here, I'll hold it up again. Ennobling Business for Success. And you can find it on Amazon and also at Barnes and Noble. Just find it online. And to get a hold of me, my website is robinlearningsystems.com. Robin Learning Systems. And there you will find about 3 sections: keynotes that I do, programs for organizations, which I touched on briefly. And also, I've created a series of women creating well-being workshops. So, workshops for women. And then my email is Robin with an I, ROBIN, at robinlearningsystems.com.
And that's systems with an S, brains. Don't forget that, or you will miss a great opportunity. Robin, you have been a wealth of information. You are a gift on so many levels. If you need to have your children learn to play the violin, if you are interested in securing your personal or your business with check systems, check it out. And also organizational behaviors, redefining what that organization looks like from the inside out. Robin is your person. So thank you so much. Brains, I need you to go in, love, like, share, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, to Spreaker. I'm everywhere on the planet. All you have to do is Google my name. I want to let you know how much I care about you. We support you in every aspect of your life, be it your mental health, your financial health, your spiritual health, just everyday people. And if you're struggling, we care about you more so. So thank you so much, Robin, for everything. Come back and visit us. Keep us informed as to what's going on. Brains, Google her. She might be somewhere in your town. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.